As I mentioned earlier, most of us here today are just kind of everyday people who've one by one slowly had enough and decided to speak up. Our next speaker, and I've only come to know her in the last 3 or 4 months, but decided to adopt her. Miss Kimberly Morin, who lives in sort of the southern part of the state, who emerged fully formed on the internet and radio and in newspapers as not only a strong Second Amendment advocate, but a fighter for liberty and a damn fine writer. And I'm delighted to introduce Kimberly Morin to you. Hey, kiddo.
We're here today for a couple of reasons. To support our fellow Americans in Connecticut, whose legislators decided to impose tyranny on them in the dark of night with no public hearings and no input from the people they're supposed to represent. They passed some of the most draconian gun laws in the state of Connecticut, literally turning law-abiding citizens into criminals. Don't think our anti-Second Amendment legislators in the House wouldn't do the same thing. They haven't done it because they can't get away with it. And why do they want to do it? Not to stop gun violence, because that's a non-existent issue in New Hampshire, but for control. My first gun rally ever was back here in January, where we froze like freaking popsicles. It didn't matter. It was awesome. I never felt safer in my life than at that gun rally. My second gun rally ever was back here in February. It was actually warmer than today. That was the first time I ever open carried. I had my little friend Glock with me. Now, to give you a little background of why this is significant, I was born and raised in Massachusetts. I didn't grow up around guns, nor did I shoot a gun until a few years ago. Actually, the first time I shot a long arm was in England, of all places. And I gotta tell you, the first time I ever shot a handgun was a .45. Probably not a good idea. I took the gun, shot it, put it down, and backed away. It scared the living crap out of me. I wanted to leave the range. My husband, great guy that he is, said, "How about you try the .357? So I'm not a quitter. I tried it, and it was love at first shot. It was empowering. Have you ever listened to 911 calls of women being attacked? They are some of the most horrifying calls I've ever listened to. Let me just tell you, it was for research. It's not because I ever want to hear one of those calls. But there was calls with women who had guns and who didn't have guns. The women who didn't have guns became victims. The women who had guns were survivors. And I'm not blaming 911. 911 does a great job, but it could take on average of 10 minutes for them to get to you. It takes less than 2 to be attacked. Now, I'm sorry, but how can I possibly defend myself against some guy who's 6'4", 300 pounds and is hell-bent on attacking me? I might be tough and think I can do it, but no. I want my gun. It's an equalizer. I refuse to be a victim. Do you really think myself or millions of other women are simply going to stand here and allow legislative loons to strip away our right to protect ourselves and our families? Hell no. Do you remember when Democrats in our very own New Hampshire House repealed the Stand Your Ground law in public? I couldn't protect myself in public. They expected New Hampshire citizens to just run away. Right, because that same 6'4" guy whose legs are twice the size of me isn't going to catch up with me quicker. They claimed when Republicans passed the Stand Your Ground law a few years ago that New Hampshire would turn into the wild, wild west. They lied. It didn't. Then they tried to take our right to protect ourselves away from us. And they would have done it if the Senate had been overrun by more crazy Democrats and some Republicans who actually pretend to be for Second Amendment rights. Their law would have turned law-abiding citizens like all of us standing here into criminals and criminals into victims. Pure and utter lunacy. I have a message for those legislators. It's my body and my choice. I choose to protect myself. If you don't like it, feel free to wait for 911. I'd rather not be a statistic. Funny how the same people are so pro-choice for women when it comes to abortion aren't pro-choice for women when it comes to the Second Amendment. Yeah. Too many people just assume that the Second Amendment is guaranteed right that won't be stripped away. They have no idea what their local legislators are doing or even the federal government. Many of these people don't have guns by choice, but believe if they ever want one, they'll have the right to get one. I was one of these people. When I lived in Mass, I finally got to the point where I really felt I needed a gun for protection. I was involved in a big political union fight in Wisconsin, had death threats, people were stalking me, typical leftist behavior. Men are really tough behind a computer. They were literally telling me they knew where I lived and exactly, describing a house. Luckily, I have a common name. Thanks, honey. They had the wrong house. But I decided that just in case, odds are nothing was going to happen, but just in case, that one psychotic person, I wanted to protect myself. So I decided I wanted to get my concealed carry in Massachusetts. Do you know what you have to do to get your concealed carry in Massachusetts? I had to take a safety training class that was approved, of course. I had to fill out a huge application, give them photos, give them my IDs, give them a birth certificate, proof of residence, and my fingerprints. Oh, and the final say was at the discretion of the chief of police. Not just based on me passing my NICS check. I'm sorry, but believe it or not, I've never been arrested. No government agency has my fingerprints. Fingerprints are for a few different kinds of people: military, certain government employees, or criminals. I'm none of the above. At first, I was dumbfounded. Then I became angry. Who the hell are they to treat me, a law-abiding citizen, like a criminal because I wanted to protect myself from criminals? And that was the straw that broke this liberty-loving woman's back. Within 2 months, I was in Live Free or Die, New Hampshire. Unfortunately, New Hampshire isn't safe. In 2010, Republicans put stand your ground laws into place. In 2012, the Democrats tried to take our right to protect ourselves away. If you don't pay attention, if you aren't mad as hell, your rights will be stripped away from you in one short legislative period. Democrats don't care about the Constitution, and neither do some Republicans. Check the voting records. They don't care that we have the right to protect ourselves. All they care about is control. They cannot be dumb enough to believe that gun control and their gun laws will stop criminals. If you don't pay attention, you elect legislators like those in Connecticut. Connecticut voters are responsible for the gun control in their state because they elected people who don't represent them. And if you know anything about Connecticut, they do it over and over and over again. They elected the very people who turned against them. They elected Democrats. Sorry, can you tell I don't like Democrats very much? These are the people who push for gun control that's paid for billionaire nannies who have bodyguards with guns and live in penthouses that have security guards at the first level. If you don't pay attention, your rights will be stripped away, and only you are to blame for that. If you don't pay attention, you will become a criminal rather than a law-abiding citizen. If you don't pay attention, you deserve what you get. America wasn't founded by sniveling wimps who hid in the closet sucking their thumbs. America was founded by fighters, people who fought for their freedom. They stood up and they fought despite the odds against them. And so should all of us. There's a quote that I have on my business cards, and I think it's one that's important to live by. It's by George S. Patton. It's better to fight for something than live for nothing. Thank you.
Anybody sensing a theme here?
Croc TV.